Good evening and welcome to the February 13th Millis School Committee meeting. The meeting is being recorded and can be viewed on Mondays at 7 p.m. on Comcast Channel 8 or Verizon Channel 37. All the meeting videos are also posted to the Millis Public Schools website under the School Committee. We'll start the meeting with a roll call. Mr. Conroy.
Here.
Mr. Catalano.
Here.
Ms. Roach.
Here.
Ms. Soul.
Present.
Superintendent.
Here.
Teacher rep, Ms. Diver. Hello. We've no student reps tonight. Jody, do we have anybody signed in for open session?
We do not.
Thank you. I'll start with our action items. Consideration to approve the 1/23/18 school committee meeting minutes.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Conroy.
I make a motion that we approve the January 23rd, 2018 meeting minutes.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Second item is the consideration to approve resolution OM11.0 Energy Star Equipment Resolution for Clyde Brown Elementary.
Madam Chair, this is part of our CHIPS certification for the new building. We basically need to pass a resolution saying that we will purchase Energy Star energy efficient appliances where available for all of the appliances in the school.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Catalano.
I make a motion to approve the Energy Star Equipment Resolution for the new Clyde Brown Elementary School.
Second.
It's moved and seconded. Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. And our last item under action items is consideration to approve resolution II 2.0 on sustainability in the design and construction of high-performance schools.
Madam Chair?
Nancy.
This is also part of the CHIPS certification process where we agree to try to build new schools that are sustainable and high-performing in terms of energy efficiency.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Conroy.
I make a motion to approve resolution II 2.0 on sustainability and the design and construction of high-performance schools.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Further discussion?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Mr. Catalano.
One of the resolutions is the second to last. Further that the school committee directs staff to report to the committee within 60 days of the passage of this resolution on the district's plan to comply with the resolution. Is that being worked on at the elementary school building committee? Is that being done here at the district? And what will the report look like?
The town energy manager, Bob Weiss and John Engler, have been conversing on this, but I do not know where they are in the process or what the report will look like.
Well, let's look at that, because if we're passing it and it says that there's a report due, we want to make sure that we're following up. And I'm not. Is this mostly around energy and sustainability, or are there other issues? Are there academic or procedural stuff beyond just building the infrastructure?
No, this is related to the new building and not academics, but more maintenance and efficiency.
Okay.
Resource efficiency. So I will follow up and ask Mr. Weiss and Mr. Engler to, provide us with some information. The CHIPS process provides what they call the roadmap and a scorecard And we are to evaluate our energy efficiency of the new building using that. It's a performance tracking system, and we're fortunate to have Mr. Weiss as the part-time energy manager for Millis, and he's very familiar with
Okay.
with these things, so we rely on him to guide us.
Okay.
Any additional discussion?
I wanted to comment that the actual policy number on the top of the policy is correct. It's typed in again.
Okay.
IIT.1.
Okay.
Then it says IIT.
Thanks, Jody. Any additional discussion? All those in favor of approving resolution II 2.1?
Aye.
Say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. Teacher representative.
Editing notes because I had a lot of things that happened last week. So, last week, the middle school talent show was February 8th. Thanks to Mrs. Hickey and Mrs. Pantiaco for organizing it. They also did 2 performances for the students yesterday, and it was fun. February 10th was Cabaret Night, another successful gathering to highlight students in the music program and from all reports. It was delightful with a packed audience. We also had our Barnes & Noble Book Fair Friday, February 9th and 10th. This was organized by the Teen Student Library Council. We had musicians, vocalists, poetry, story reading, and we have an estimate of about $600 for us from there, which requires that people spend about $3,000 in sales. So it was pretty good. We had a visit from, very quick one, from the new public library director, Kim Tolson, who met with some of the staff, and we are going to be continuing collaborating with the public library with AP testing, senior projects, book groups, etc. And Ms. Tolson was enthusiastic about this, and so are we. Upcoming, this Thursday, February 15th, there'll be another prom fashion show from 7 to 9, coordinated by Merit. This includes a number of raffles, vendors, student runway models, and more, and it's a really nice time for kids that are going to go to the prom. On Wednesday, February 28th, after vacation, the middle school writers showcase will be happening right here, 2:30. There are about a dozen middle school students who we've been working with in a writers club for the past 6-week workshop. I coordinate that with Mrs. Robinson, and this is open to everybody. That evening, February 28th, there'll be a paint night to support Jake McGee's senior project. The time for that is 6 to 8 p.m. Cost is $15, and proceeds will help him renovate the faculty room. We have also a request to help support Rudy Hassenfuss's senior project by donating new or gently used winter clothing in support of Vietnam Veterans of America. And last but not least, March 7th, we're having our next small school big conference career fair. This is coordinated through the guidance officer for high school students to connect with career possibilities. It's a really nice setup. We did it last year. It was very successful. Looking forward to another great time this year. That's it.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay. We'll move to time and learning for nothing tonight. Packed for next meeting, but I
Right.
know we had some changes with the
Correct.
move in the date. So we'll move to the superintendent's report.
Originally, Jen Starr would have been here. The information she developed is in your packets, but she'll be here at our meeting after vacation to go through that more in detail. But I can say they had a very successful kickoff to the technology advisory community groups that she's organized for our technology planning purposes. The February enrollment, we have some changes. Basically, 5 students have moved out of district. Actually more than that, but we had one come back, so we are at 1,301 students with 91 choice students. The projected class sizes for next year also is in your packet, with the approximate average class sizes that we will have given. This is given our current staffing at those grade levels. So for example, our current kindergarten is at 101 or 2 students, and that is at you can see, moved up to grade 1 next year with, we don't know kindergarten registration yet, but we are anticipating ideally around 90 and maybe a few more, but that is in process right now. So we do not need to vote it at this time, but we will have a better idea a little later in the year, but we do need to at some point vote to be a school choice district. We do not have to vote the exact number of slots we have at each level, though.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Catalano?
where do we stand based on our December 19th meeting of reaching out to kids in preschool and letting them know that they have the ability to waive or to request a waiver of the age restriction on kindergarten? That was something that we agreed on, that we were going to open it up to parents in preschool so that they have that ability. It's not a guarantee. So I'm wondering what we've done as we start to look at class sizes next year and potential choice slots.
I don't recall, so you would like a memo to be sent to preschool parents, letting them know
There was a
that-
discussion where we said that the only waiver requests that we've had have been around Spanish immersion, and that we don't want to be just doing waiver requests or taking waiver requests for Spanish immersion, and that we should be able to open it up to everyone. That was in town hall with the parents right there in the room.
Yeah, I don't recall that we took a vote.
No, we didn't take a vote.
It wasn't a vote, but there was a discussion and a consensus that there would be something explored about acknowledging that if we were going to entertain this process, that we needed to not limit it to Spanish immersion only, and that it needed to be. We didn't design a process. We didn't say it
Right.
had to be a memo.
Yeah.
We said that from that point until at some point in the relatively near future, that there would be some further discussion and approach designed to address the fact that we currently only offer this to Spanish immersion students when their parents request it, so that they can move into the district or come into school.
Yes, so I recall the discussion. I don't recall that we actually mapped out any next steps.
No, it wasn't that we mapped out specific next steps, but there was a consensus that it would be looked at, and so I think the question Mr. Catalano is asking is, has that been done, and as we're getting there, where are we?
Madam Chair, so it sounds like you'd like me to undertake the process to research the ramifications of and make some recommendations as to how we can communicate the fact that a waiver is indeed available to all parents. There is a process for waiving the entrance age to kindergarten.
Under specific guidelines, though.
Yes.
Madam Chair, I guess our policy, it lists ages for kindergarten and first grade, and I mean, anyone could ask for a waiver at any point. It's nothing specific to Spanish immersion. Just in this case, the family was looking for a waiver for their child to get into Spanish immersion. And I guess my comment is just, we want to send out an arbitrary letter to parents to say, if you'd like your child's age waived, you have the option? It seems like a
No,
bizarre.
that wasn't,
No,
wasn't
no,
the discussion.
that wasn't the discussion at all.
Okay,
The
then I don't
discussion was-
understand.
The discussion was that, yes, we have a policy that's very stringent. We have now, in my time, waived it twice and not waived it once. The one time we waived it for a student who was moving in from out of state, who was already in a grade. And then we've had 2 requests for Spanish immersion students to get into a grade earlier than our policy allows.
Yeah.
Once it was declined and once it was accepted. When we had this last discussion, and vote, there was a discussion about the fact that, and specifically, the main reason that I voted no was because the policy doesn't give a lot of latitude as it's written. In fact, we removed latitude that historically had been there. And the only time, we're not doing anything to allow for, communicate with existing Millis residents that this is an opportunity that exists. We only hear it when residents are moving into town, and coincidentally or not, it's also only been for Spanish immersion students.
So what's your recommendation, Mark?
I think what we had talked about that night was either the teachers do some type of an evaluation, there's some, it's not a wide open thing, but maybe the teachers do an evaluation. If a teacher believes that a student could potentially go into a grade later, that they would have a communication with the parent and say, would you want? I know you might think this is crazy, but I have a problem with the fact, and this wasn't just me, but I do think it is absolutely unfair that the only students who are allowed or aware that this is an option are residents moving into town, and history has shown the only ones who look for it and the only ones we give it to are those moving in for Spanish immersion, which means it's an opportunity that is secluded only for Spanish immersion program and not English curriculum students in this district.
So that they just happen to be the people that appealed for a waiver. So couldn't it be, as a suggestion, on a case-by-case basis? I mean, if parents,
That's what I'm saying.
we're on camera right now, if
but
people
right
feel
now-
that they want their child to be waived for kindergarten or first grade based on their age, they could come to the committee. You could get a yes or a no answer. There could be inconsistency because the committee turns over and it's a different vote, potentially year over year. Instead of opening it up, it sounds kind of, we really want teachers evaluate, it sounds kind of
Have we not granted any of these for anyone that's not in Spanish immersion? So Mike Banks mentioned to me that he came before the committee,
He did, and that was the one that I mentioned. They moved.
They were already in the grade.
and he's not Spanish immersion.
No,
No,
Mark said
that's
that.
it.
It was just in a grade.
But
They were-
he's a parent that's not Spanish immersion that took the opportunity
Right,
to
they
come
were
and
moving- they were
put a,
moving-
but he came,
Right. They
found
were
out that there
moving-
was an option to have a waiver.
Well, that was for kindergarten. At that point, Corinne wasn't in Spanish immersion, but she is now.
Right, but I guess what I'm saying is, if a parent has an interest to have their child's age restriction requirement to be waived, we have an example of somebody having nothing to do with Spanish immersion that came before the committee and asked for a waiver.
And there's a process that they follow.
And there's a process that they followed. In the same way that a Spanish immersion family came before the committee and asked about the waiver. So my recollection of our discussion was, do we want to take a look at the policy and see if there's anything from a policy perspective that we might want to change?
It was both.
So,
I don't think there's anything, this is just, sorry.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything about the policy I mean, it has a clear age restriction, but people come before the committee and request a waiver with different circumstances by child. The committee evaluates it on a case-by-case basis. There's nothing discriminatory about it. And it just happens to be that those families, their children were going into first grade for Spanish immersion in your examples.
But I guess, and this was part of the conversation that was had, was we don't do anything to make parents aware that that is an option.
But I don't think we do for Spanish immersion people either. It's a byproduct of people as they move into the district. Has anybody in district, not in Spanish immersion or in Spanish immersion, in district that hasn't been moving from the outside, have to come before the committee to ask for a waiver?
But there is.
It's driven by a move into
hold on.
district.
But the thing is, but parents are not given the option. There is nothing that tells a parent that if you wanted to go down this path, if we have kids who are in preschool, you do 3 years of preschool. There is nothing ever communicated or stated or acknowledged that instead of having your child do a 3rd year of preschool, if you would rather have them test in or however into kindergarten or go from kindergarten, that's available. It's just, and technically, yes, you can read the policy and you can do it, but it is not anything that we advocate or articulate as something individuals can do.
So what's your recommendation, Mark?
Well, the recommendation, and this isn't my recommendation. This isn't like I put this forward. We had a thorough conversation about this case.
Do you have a recommendation?
No, I don't.
Okay.
But the discussion was, and what Mr. Catalano was asking about was that we were going to explore this because it was acknowledged that this is an opportunity afforded to incoming residents to Millis, or that has been taken advantage of and not taken advantage of in that way. It has been requested and utilized, thank you, utilized by residents moving into Millis, but it is not something that is utilized by residents of Millis.
Well,
Spanish immersion or not.
sure. I mean, people seek out Millis if they're moving, if they're interested in the Spanish immersion program, they're moving to Massachusetts or they're moving to this general area, they're looking for a Spanish immersion program. Millis pops up. It's a great thing that people might move to Millis because there's an opportunity. And then they see there's an age restriction, so maybe they research a waiver. I guess I don't understand. I get the sense that we feel like people in, well, you're saying people in Millis don't have the same opportunity, but I don't see anything that's hindering anybody from requesting a waiver for anything. If they do their research, they look at a policy, there's an age restriction, my child has this circumstance, would the committee consider it? There's nothing that's hindering that process. As I'm trying to think through a recommendation based on what you're suggesting, as you're enrolling for kindergarten or you're enrolling for preschool, maybe some sort of text at the bottom that says in extenuating circumstances we might grant a waiver based on the policy age restriction noted. I'm just trying to take your comments to a next level.
So maybe but circling back to what Mr. Catalano's question was, is there was a discussion at that meeting, and a discussion specifically stated that it would be, there was a desire from the committee to have the administration and us in some way look at whether or not how we would do this so that it was not something that appeared to only be utilized. And Mr. Catalano asked the question of what has been done, and I think the answer is
Nothing has been done.
nothing has been done.
Nothing's been done.
That's fine.
That's nothing.
Are we going to do something? That's the next question.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
It occurs to me, and I like the suggestion that Ms. Sewell made on registration materials, that we could develop a couple sentences, some language, and the appropriate place might be in the Clyde Brown handbook. If I'll check and we approve handbooks. And maybe we include some language on the registration materials too, to just let people know that while a policy is in place with these age parameters or restrictions for entrance into kindergarten and first grade, please inquire as to something, some language about, please check with the principal to inquire about a process. Internally, we can develop the process. I do recall that the committee preferred not to have evaluations occur prior to the committee voting.
Correct.
And I communicated that to Mr. Phelps. But if you'd like, for the next meeting, I can inquire and then pass it by legal counsel about what some appropriate language might be.
Madam Chair,
So,
I like my own suggestion, but I guess I'm just concerned that the extra staffing hours, we might, I don't know, I'm concerned about a lot of people requesting that waiver, and if there's, we'd have to, I guess, sort of academically, they'd have to figure out if there's testing involved, references. I mean, I don't know what it is that would be the, what the parameters would be to allow people in through the waiver, but do we have staffing to support that type of analysis? I just don't know what the demand would be. And are you, as a committee, does the committee want to go through this process for 10, 15 kids a year? I just don't know what the demand would be. Is that something you really want to open up? It's a question for the committee.
Madam Chair, I think that we need to know what those extenuating circumstances would be. I don't think with any guidelines, and if we put that text in there, I think, Jen's right, we may have everyone say, hey, well, we can request a waiver. So if we have this influx of requests for these waivers, what are the parameters around it?
Well, it does. It opens up, but it goes to, again, part of the conversation that I think this at least touched on, but is there an element of merit-based, becomes merit-based?
Why can't it just be on a case-by-case basis? I don't understand.
No,
why
but
it
if it
can't
was
just be a
case-by-case, then it goes to your point, you're going to evaluate. So what is it would be the same criteria that we've used in the existing scenarios. So in one case, the student was already in the grade that they were being asked to stay in. So that was relatively easy, they're already there. In the other two cases, it was students who were being asked to jump a grade, and evaluations were done on their academic ability, references to teachers, and it became basically and the strongest recommendation to put those students into the higher grade is that it was in the best interest of the student and they were academically and socially ready. So I would say that my expectation would be that if we got more requests, that if the student was socially and academically ready, that we would hear that it would be in the best interest of the student to move them on to the grade that they are ready for.
I guess why would you stop at kindergarten and first grade? You could do it for any grade. And I don't know. I think we're going down a slippery slope here.
What you suggested sounds like a policy change to me, by putting parameters in place so it's not a case-by-case evaluation. It's, one, if they're moving, they're already in the grade, either in another town and they're moving in, or two.
I was just going to say, the older version of the policy that I had incorrectly
Right.
is exactly had all of those things in it.
And when we've had those, it was still a recommendation to allow the student to move forward. That student didn't. We then removed all of those stipulations on the advice of counsel to have it very plain, very cut and dry, with a stipulation that the committee can approve.
So we removed it, but if we continue to use the same procedures every time, it becomes de facto policy, right? If it's not written down, but if every time, and I'm not saying we have to put it back in, we should be talking with legal counsel, but if we're following the same steps, that becomes our procedure. So maybe the policy is still scaled back, but maybe what we're looking at is establishing our procedures. So the decision would always, or the recommendation would always come from a teacher to Jason or whoever, but it comes from an educator through the superintendent to the committee, and we defer to them. It's not just, I want my kid in, it's, is the child ready to go? So maybe it's the procedures, maybe we keep the policy scaled back, and we're outlining procedures that may include updating language on handbooks and in forms.
And it sounds like there's a little bit of things we would have to work out, because when we had the discussion previously, it was we shouldn't have an evaluation prior to coming to the school committee. This would almost require an evaluation
Well, it almost
prior to
becomes
coming
a
to.
two-step process.
Yeah, yeah.
There's a waiver coming down the pike, and then the superintendent may give us an overview, and it's either clear cut that it's a no, right? Or it looks like it's a possibility, and then we go to the next stage.
I'd be curious to see where we landed on that. So we'd have to approve it to go forward and be evaluated, and then evaluate, and then make a decision as to whether they move or not.
So a two-step sort of process. One, the initial request, and then decide we're going to go ahead to evaluate, and then come back again.
If they're looking to
decide
put it,
whether it's going.
if they're trying to get a 3.5-year-old kid into kindergarten, that's probably going to be an automatic no, right? There are kids in preschool who are 3.5, right? Is that the earliest age?
Preschool?
Even a little lower.
Even
Some
older.
3.5-year-olds can read. They're academically pretty savvy.
But are they going to be socially? I mean, it's a question of.
But then you actually
academic-
have to make that determination, right? So like I'm just trying to figure out how we would make a determination to move it to the next phase without having some level of evaluation happen before it came to us.
Seems like doing the research up front and the evaluation would be prudent before it comes to the committee.
I think the concern was if they were evaluated and administration said, yes, they're ready, and there was some other circumstance that the committee would then decide not to go with that evaluation or recommendation, that we've kind of put ourselves in a corner. So that's why we flipped it.
Yeah.
It's all level setting too.
The
Right.
communication
We're
with
doing this
parents.
evaluation.
Yeah.
But it's not an automatic. So maybe it's a
Yeah,
conversation.
I agree. I think it's
Yeah.
expectation setting right up front with the families, which is part of the waiver, part of the process now that you've requested a waiver is an evaluation. And then we get the findings
that's
that
no-
that's not a guarantee.
Positive evaluation is not a
Correct,
guarantee
exactly.
of entry.
Right.
And to
Right.
answer Jen's question, however many it is, I'm prepared to do the work. That's our job.
I feel strongly that this can be a case, the policy as it is fine. On a case-by-case basis, people can come before this committee for whatever grade. I think that a lot of what's been recommended here is just over-engineering the process and creating more work.
No, we don't know how much more work it's going to be. If
Well,
if
that's my
anyone can
opinion.
come, no, that's of course. And part of it is you missed the conversation, that there was a rather lengthy conversation that this
I get the gist now,
took
though.
place.
So, coming out of this discussion, I just want to have some clarity on what we collectively will do coming out of this. So, it sounds like policy would remain the same, but maybe we could come with some process recommendations or procedures
There's always
related
procedures attached to almost every policy.
related to waiver requests and what would happen. So with some recommendations on, to Steve's, I think Steve had mentioned it, and to your point, Nancy, like where we would want to update, like handbooks and things like that, and then procedures for the waiver process.
And the potential process that is the consensus of the committee is to have the family come to the committee. Maybe there's a simple form that's we request a waiver without extensive information.
Well, I don't think they have to come to the committee. I think I think truly that part of that is just a level setting and expectations. Is that you're making this waiver, but there's a process here, but you really got to be clear that this is not a guarantee. By doing the assessment, we're not saying the process is starting and you're going to get accepted, right?
So we could make it we could still make it a single step process
Right.
And we just have to have the messaging to the families be, here's how the process works. So the process is you fill the waiver out, we do the evaluation, we bring it to the school committee, and then you find out what happened. Something to that effect.
Right. So, and just to be clear, I do think that was said to all three families. I wasn't there in the conversations, but I do not think it was ever conveyed that it was a done deal because we did.
We're not suggesting otherwise.
Okay, because we were doing an evaluation that it was a sign that we agreed with them, that.
We're not
So,
saying that
okay.
administrators do that, but parents could think they're assessing this as a positive, right?
Okay.
People are looking for something, and they may see that I think it's just a really kind of, this is the process. There are multiple steps to this process.
Okay, and to make it clear in the language on whatever form they fill out, that there is just a process we follow that, and it's school committee's determination after the process is followed. Okay, I think I'm clear.
Yep.
And then you'd like also some ideas of where would be the appropriate places or times to convey this information. I think what we need to look into administratively is what the ramifications would be of that if we were to, at various gatherings, announce it. It would be almost encouraging people to seek the waivers. So I think it's not that we're, I think our age guidelines are in place for good reasons, and so we wouldn't want to encourage many waivers, but at the same time we do want to let people know that it is a possibility. Is that okay?
That was the discussion.
Okay.
So we had started with class size. We started with class size. I think you would talk through all the choice components and all of that, and the slots we have. Yeah.
One question on the third, fourth grade, so the .5.
Yes.
Is that the blended classroom?
Yes.
Right,
So looking at the numbers, we, with 11 and 11 from third grade, 11 students from third, 11 from fourth, the numbers continue to work out well to continue that model. We are pleased with the results, although I think that Mr. Phelps and the teacher will be bringing that information to the committee later in the spring, but for planning purposes, we plan to continue with the same pilot, even though it's not a pilot classroom, call it the Learning Lab classroom for next year.
And can we just, maybe they can during the presentation, but I know there was some confusion last year when we rolled this out about who was going to be in the classroom and how invitations to it then subsequently went out. And so that kind of was part of the genesis of my question here too, is there may have been confusion on how some of us understood it last year, but in order for this kind of math to work, you need 11 and 11, and at least I, at the outset, was under the impression that this was going to be a targeted for whoever were the students who were best suited for this classroom setting, and that didn't necessarily guarantee 11 and 11. And so I guess my question is, do we have 11 and 11? And if we don't, how does that impact what our class sizes are?
Okay, thank you. I'll get back and clarify with them around that. School calendars. even though it seems early in the year to be talking about next year, we in central office get phone calls about what our school calendar will look like next year. Also, the construction company and our project manager have asked us to provide, not this summer, but the summer of 2019, to provide them with as much summertime without students in the building as possible. For a couple of reasons, in case there are delays for the final push of moving in and setting up and putting together the furniture, and also giving teachers time to set up. Things are currently looking good, and with some minor delays in construction, but they're still pushing for fall of 2019 opening the building. So in your packets, our school calendar for next year, 2018-19, is not much different than what we currently have. We have not included conference dates on that because we're taking a look at how conferences rolled out this year and the timing, and we're currently in discussion with teachers about what will work best for conferences. So we did not include those, but they would not impact the ending date. So much like our usual schedule, we would begin with before Labor Day, the last week of August, with 2 days for teachers, professional development, 2 days for students, have the Friday before Labor Day off, so families can have an extra long weekend. And the only other notable thing about next year is that the winter holiday break is rather long. We discussed, because Christmas falls on Tuesday, so it really doesn't make sense to have school on the 24th. The following year it gets even a little worse, but we would then end school, if we don't have any weather-related days, on June 13th, which is pretty much as we have our schedule usually. So ideally, we wouldn't have many snow days and we could end on June 13th. It's the following year of 1920 that we would not start school at the end of August. We would wait until after Labor Day. Labor Day happens to be quite early in September. It's September 2nd of 2019. And that entire week we have slated for just professional development and move in for Clyde Brown teachers. So students would not be in the building. It gives construction and movers an extra week. Students would then start September 9th, which unfortunately pushes us out until June 19th if we don't have any snow days. I've met with Marianne Zemba, the president of the union, and we've made one adjustment. The calendar as it stood had us going until June 22nd, the Monday, and chances are we would have a snow day, but we decided to adjust some of the release day time so that instead of a full day on Martin Luther King Day, we're recommending that be an early release day. And since it's a year out, we do not have to vote it now. It can be discussed, but I wanted to bring it to the committee just so that families know that in 2019, we will not we're recommending that we don't start school until September 9th for students. Again, conference days are to be discussed, and even the release day schedule can be discussed further. And that is the year where we have quite a long winter break. It ends up being an 11-day vacation. But the only remedy for that would be to have school on Monday, the 23rd of December. And in discussing it with everybody, they thought that would not be a very productive day and that families would appreciate not having that day. School.
So do we need a vote on this year's
On
calendar?
18,
I
19.
yeah, if you don't mind,
Yeah.
it'd be great to approve and post this year's calendar with the caveat that conference days are to be determined. Or we could delay, we could wait and in a month vote on the calendar. Either way.
Madam Chair,
Ms. Roach?
just a crazy question. Has the school committee or has the school ever taken a look at February and April vacations? And I know there's some states, I know in Connecticut, they've reduced one and only have 1 week off so they can get out a week early. Have we ever explored that here?
Have you looked at that
I
here?
think it's been discussed in the past, and I know various districts continue to discuss it. If
What do you think the appetite of that is in Millis?
Madam Chair.
So I can,
Sorry.
go ahead.
You
Go ahead.
Just from the conversations that I recall, it's been a challenge because for childcare for people, most of the state has February and April breaks, so a lot of the childcare options are available in those dates. So if we consolidate and just say had one in March, the childcare options aren't there for a lot of people, but that's what I recall the most about that.
And this actually came up in one of the collaborative discussions with school committee members where multiple districts were talking about it and none of them had adopted it because their challenge was unless a lot of districts moved to it, that it would be challenging for one-off districts here and there to do it. So they were thinking if it was a statewide undertaking, that it would be a lot easier for them to implement. So none of them, and there were probably 5 different districts that were speaking. They had all looked at it, and none of them had adopted it.
So everyone's just waiting for somebody to pull the trigger.
Or like a bunch of people. I don't know of
Yeah.
anybody in Massachusetts that's moved to just
To do
March. That's
March.
I
that's
think
public.
I saw something in the Globe.
That's
There's
public.
a couple.
Yeah, that's
Private,
public
right,
school.
all
Right,
the
like all the
private-
privates
private
do
Private
it.
schools
Yeah.
have March,
Right,
but-
right.
They
I
also
thought there
start
was
and end
one.
differently,
I
too.
thought there was
I read
one
that, too.
public.
yes.
There was a discussion in the Globe. Someone may have sent it around. That there was a lot of school districts were talking about it, but
Yeah.
one had done it. I forget who it was.
Because it was the big topic 2 years ago when we had all the snow days.
That's right.
It was
Yeah,
Right.
days.
right,
exactly
right.
what it was.
Yeah,
Days.
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Madam Chair, one consideration we talk about is getting a week in February to get germs out of the building and do a thorough disinfection. And we are disinfecting, I want to say that and reiterate to people, we are disinfecting surfaces, doorknobs, push handles on doors, everything. But just having no one in the building reinfecting each other helps in February. I don't have data, though, from the nurses to prove that it helps, but it's kind of the general consensus.
Yeah, so I'm happy to shoot a note.
question.
Yeah. And I'm happy to shoot a note around to the distribution list for the school committee members and see if anybody's talking about it right now, because they do those on a fairly regular basis.
So the one question, and I'm not suggesting we do this, but just throw it out there. What if in the 1920 year where we're starting so late, what if we didn't have one of those weeks of vacation? Because think about it, the potential, the absolute last day, or the one on the schedule is the 19th, correct?
But snow days are going to push us in.
And it's going to push it. I mean, we literally could be,
4th of July. I mean,
right, you could be right
And
into
we-
June 30th.
And we
July
can't.
weekend.
For the second.
We can't go past June 30, right? With the
Yeah,
teacher
30,
contract.
teacher contract.
With the teacher contract, we can't go past
Right.
June 30.
I think
And
it's
the
a state law
district,
too.
and remember
Okay.
with the issue with Clyde Brown,
Yeah.
we were talking to them and they said, you can't go.
Oh, right,
Right.
right, with the air quality,
So
right. that's
maybe
right.
we have a conversation, and I don't know if you've done your survey yet, but this could be something we could look at. Which of the two, would it be February or would it be April? And it's an option because
Or combine? Oh, you mean just drop one? Just
drop one of them, because they both each have a holiday
Yeah.
on the Monday,
Yeah.
so everyone will still have
Right.
a long weekend. I'll speak as a parent, not as a committee member. I'd rather lose one of those weeks than have kids going to school until the 24th and 25th.
I mean,
That's way too
especially
late.
with such a long Christmas break. I mean, that's
Right.
7 days
Yeah.
off with
That's a
weekends.
long
That's
day.
a long
8 days really,
break.
because it goes
So
to
maybe
New
we,
Year's.
maybe
Yeah,
we
yeah,
look
actually,
at
it's 8 days, you're
adjusting just for,
That calendar.
because it's not,
that makes
we're not getting rid of it.
Yeah,
We're just
right,
saying,
right.
because of a late start.
Yeah,
Right, with
Yeah.
the late start and
Yeah.
the long,
Because that late start is gonna impact people because,
Yeah.
I mean,
oh yeah, there's
normally
no options for, there's no, you talk
There's a-
childcare, like there's no
camps-
camp options.
camps
and-
closed down,
'cause
I
everyone's
mean-
back.
There's a holiday in January, a holiday already in February, so it kind of makes the case for the April break, like you're saying, the long winter. You're coming back later
Yeah.
in
Right.
January,
Yeah.
then you have a holiday in January, then there's already a holiday in February.
Yeah,
so
kept the full Martin Luther King in that year.
I don't know, that's
just
just
an
an
April
option
break.
because
no, I like
I'm
looking at it from.
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
worried
Yeah.
And we
about,
could
Yeah.
use, we could
Yeah,
use
that's good.
2019, 2020 to try something. Like,
right,
it-
as a one-off.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
A trial.
Try
Right.
it just because it does make sense
Yeah.
to find a way to get us off of that 2016.
Yeah.
Because these buildings get hot
Yeah.
and they're unbearable, and as Nancy has said, the quality learning is not in June.
Right.
The quality learning is, what is the sweet month? It's usually March,
Now,
October,
January,
and-
February, March.
January, February, and March, so. Just a thought. And I think we should ask, but we're gonna ask, and they're gonna be one's gonna be get rid of February,
Right.
one's gonna be
Right.
get rid of April.
Right,
Sure.
Like you could have three
And because
options,
it's-
get rid of February, get rid of April,
Or make it
Or make
combine
it
it
combined.
to
March.
March.
Maybe,
Into March.
maybe we do it as
March
that
is
one
actually,
trial, that one
March is
trial.
actually
Yeah.
the longest month because March, there
Yeah.
is
There's
there's
nothing.
no
There's nothing in
holidays,
March.
yeah.
St. Patrick's Day is not a holiday, Mark, you know that.
Can we coordinate it so that.
And they would have to have Patriots
that
Day
week-
as a
That week
holiday.
in March, that is also the NCAA tournament, the Thursday, Friday.
It's evacuation
Or
day
a
in
week in
Boston,
March
so
for
it's
the
a
flight
Boston
prices.
holiday.
Right,
When I
right,
worked for the
right,
city, it was a day
right,
off.
Yeah.
right,
And Bunker Hill
yes,
Day.
I always
yeah,
had
Bunker
it
Hill
off in
Day.
Boston.
Flights would be half
In March.
if you, in
Half the
March,
price,
or
yeah.
just
Yeah.
a week off of.
Less lines in Disney World.
We're selling it.
This is great.
So if I
It could
can
be
ask a question.
Trailblazers.
Would it be confusing for parents to survey them now? Would you rather wait till the fall of next, or the spring of next year, around this time next year, to survey them about the following year? Or
No,
Or
because we should probably
November?
do it sooner because we're looking at the calendar now.
There'd be a lot
Okay.
of planning.
You just have to be really clear.
That it's
okay,
That's
for
1920.
new,
And that
New
there's
Clyde
no
Brown
guarantee,
School,
and that there's no
right? Like,
guarantee that we're doing
around that.
anything,
Yeah,
but that we're.
yeah.
And I
I mean,
also think letting parents know now that they're not going back to school until the 9th,
yeah.
that is a
Right.
huge
The
difference.
9th of
2019.
2019,
Yes.
yes, yeah.
2019,
2019.
right, because people inevitably will read it and say, so we'll have to be like
Very clear.
surrounding the opening of the new Clyde Brown.
Maybe in part of your communication, it's very
like
clear.
they'll all
you're
read it wrong.
You're talking about the 18-19 year, and
Right.
then you separate it out. And just to give there's some issues with the 19-20, and here are some of the concerns and what we're looking to do.
Okay.
So can we vote
Sorry, Will.
18, 19?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Conroy?
I make a motion that we approve the 2018-2019 calendar as presented, knowing that there will be potential changes for conference dates.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you. Madam Chair, we also have in your packets the warrants. The selectmen voted to open the warrants. They close, I believe, on the 25th of February. So you have the summary sheet, and then in previous packets you have the full rationale for each one. This new cover sheet is the request of the town administrator for some consistency for the capital planning committee. So it provides a brief summary of each warrant article, and we have placed them on the cover sheet as in rough order of priority internally, but then the committee can alter that order of priority if they wish. I do wish to call to your attention the write-up for the computer lease that is, because of the lack of free cash in town, we want to speak to the committee a little bit about that computer lease and what it provides the district. It's a 3-year lease for $69,900 approximately. It may be a little less than that because of the interest rates, etc. But it provides us with about $23,000. There are installments, 3 years of installments of about $23,000 each. So it provides us with almost $70,000 worth of equipment that is essential for replacing teacher laptops. This upcoming year, it's slated to replace the grade 8 iPads. The grade 8 iPads, we try to roll over to new ones every 4 years because after that, the operating system and the apps become a little less, they become less useful. But we still use them. They are usually then disseminated to classrooms at Clyde Brown and sometimes in 5th and 6th grades for use. So they do have a longer life than 4 years, but for the use in grade 8, it's important that we have up-to-date apps and functionality.
Nancy,
Yes.
how many of the laptops that we're replacing, how many are 4 or 5 years old?
So in Jen Starr's information, and she'll be here at the next meeting to go into depth, she has on page 2, the grid of the laptops and the age that when they were purchased, in which lease cycle. And generally, we try to purchase about 35 teacher laptops to replace them. But because this upcoming year, we need more for the iPads, we have dropped that to 25 replacements. They were purchased in FY15. So those laptops, many of them, I'd say most of them were all purchased in FY15. So they are 4 years old. I know mine, I just had to have mine replaced because of the battery, and it was actually 6 years old. So we get more than 4 years out of these, but they are recycled to purposes that are perhaps less critical, or people who, maybe paraprofessionals or in classrooms that they're adequate, but not perhaps high performing.
Okay, thank you.
So the warrant closes on 25th,
Yes.
I believe. So knowing that we're going into working session to discuss budget, we have the annual task of determining whether we're going to put the must funds plus the potentials all up, or just the must funds.
I do believe, and I did clarify this with the town administrator, there are parallel processes unfolding right now. The typical warrant process where we have to have it to selectmen by the town administrator by the 25th to go on the town warrant as an article there. And then the capital planning committee is also undergoing their process. So I do believe all of these would be submitted to the capital planning committee. They are all over $5,000 and have a useful life of at least 3 years, was it, or 5 years?
I can't recall.
I think but it has to have a certain useful life. And so all of them will go to the capital planning committee, but for the vote tonight, it is to prioritize and send forth which ones we wish to appear in the town warrant.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Catalano.
a couple things. One, when Nancy and I went to the tri-board meeting, they had produced a spreadsheet. There's a little more information ahead of budgeting this year than in years past. They had a must-fund warrant articles, and then they had high-priority warrant articles, which is a new term. And there were no school priorities on there. It was all town. And then, as part of the calculations, they were taking the high priorities off before we did the split. So part of my thought process when I look at this warrant article is we put everything up. We can have a prioritization because they can always take it down. The self-editing, it's a good exercise for us, but it doesn't help really represent our needs because clearly they have high priorities. So we can have must funds, high priorities, and low priorities, but I wasn't necessarily happy with that. I know that was just an initial discussion, but I have concerns about editing ourselves where I think we should put it out there. I think that's part of what Peter Germain talked about for years is what's the real picture, and it's what we do with the administrators here. Tell us everything you need. It's not a promise, and then we can start to work from that. And we tell the administrators don't self-edit. So I don't think as a committee we should be self-editing our warrant list, and especially where some of these have been on for years and years. So it does make a compelling case that we've put this in the bathrooms for 5 years straight, and we've done this for 5 years, 6 years. It's like, eventually we got to do it, right? We got to bite the bullet. My other piece is, I do have a concern on the rationale for the baseball field, and because the baseball field is borderline unsafe, and I'm concerned. Clearly, safety is a priority. And I don't want to be in a position of saying work on a baseball field should take other warrants off, but I know that's a subjective term, borderline unsafe, but how close to the edge are we? I don't want to have kids hurt themselves. That would be a very bad thing. We know what the money is in the town right now. There's not a lot. And $60,000 is a substantial amount of money. But I think as we go through this process, we really need to think about that. Is it going to become completely unsafe during the season, or can we get another season out of the field and then try to figure something out at the end of the year or going into the fall town meeting? I don't know. It's just that term, and I know it's potentially unsafe, but that's a red flag for me.
Well, it also, and we've talked about this even just within the committee in terms, if that is really where it is, I don't know that it's appropriate for us to just put it up at town meeting and hope it gets funded. Like, if we really have to do this, we have to do this. And it's not, if it's not an option, it's not an option. And so, yeah, I agree with Steve. One, the language of putting this out there, but two, the reality. So you can take the words off the piece of paper, but if it's still true,
Right.
then I would argue we just have to figure this out, and it probably needs to come off the list because we just have to do it ourselves.
Because we've said we don't put warrants up, and then if they don't get funded, we then find the money, right? So it's a question of if this needs to be done, we don't put it up, and then we have 60 is a lot of money.
That's a lot of money.
That is a lot of money.
That's a
That's not a $5,000 at the
Right,
end of
right,
June, we can
right.
find $5,000. That is a lot of money.
And I think if I remember the discussion that we had with John, the work needs to start
I
as
know.
soon as possible after the season is over. So they're still they're planning to play the season, but as soon as that's done, which would mean that we really need to have the funds, find the funds so that they can start the work
June
as
15th
early,
or whatever-
exactly,
whenever the
as
season
soon as they
ends.
can. Yeah.
Madam Chair, also, there was discussion about, can this be a joint venture where we put forth 20,000 on a town warrant, we commit to 20,000 from some source, and, because I don't think we're gonna have
baseball.
heat savings this year, but we might. And then maybe youth baseball tries to, or we engage in joint fundraising activities to come up with the other 20,000.
I feel like we're on the hook for the whole 60.
Well, I guess my only concern with that is it's now February, that plan's not in place.
Right.
I don't see the town having, the municipal side having an extra 20,000 to put towards this, and the ability of a private organization to raise $20,000 in 3 months is going to be almost impossible. Not that we shouldn't explore finding
grants?
private
Right.
money,
Right.
but I think we
There.
I think we need to take this article off, and it's just something we're going to have to figure out. If we can do it in conjunction with the baseball league or whoever else, great. One question I have on the auditorium, the 3-year that we have listed here, is just $17,500 to replace the 40 chairs, but I know our real 3-year number is $50,000.
Yes.
So
that was a self-edit.
I would leave it at 50,000.
Okay.
Because we put this proposal before the town at prior town meetings, and I think we need to, and if it's going on the capital plan, we need to keep the numbers the same.
Okay.
But personally, I'd agree with Steve, and I think, other than the baseball field, I would say we put them all up.
Put them all up.
How's everybody feel about removing the baseball field?
I'm for it.
I don't think we have an option. Safety first.
Just safety, Steve.
Okay,
And
yeah.
some of these
yeah.
smaller ones, if we do find in the next couple of months that we can take them up, and with the due date of February 25th for the warrant, we can request for them to come down. It's a lot harder to work out timing to get new ones added on.
So I will entertain a motion to approve the warrants and capital needs for FY19 as outlined, with item number 3 under the potential warrants omitted.
So moved.
I would also request
Oh,
that we change
auditorium,
the auditorium
sorry.
price
Yep.
to $50,000.
Nancy, you said you prioritize these with your
Yes.
admin team.
Based on mostly John Engler's recommendations.
Somebody second? Moved, it got moved.
Second.
Further discussion?
I just have one
Yeah.
thing. There's nothing here about the replacement of the roof on the on the older side of the school. Does that
I'm
need to
sorry,
be
the
done?
what?
The roof replacement there's one side of the school that didn't get replaced. Should that be on here?
Which school?
This school.
This one.
This
Of
school,
this
sorry.
school.
There was one, I remember looking at that, and it was due to be replaced, I think, last year.
Right.
Not that it, but it's something that should be on our radar, and it was a big ticket item. So if we're putting things up there, we know this big expense is coming up.
I can check.
Okay.
We can, one of two things, I don't recall the amount right now, but
It
I,
was 200,000,
200,000?
if I remember correctly, but
If
we'd have
you'd
to
like
take a look.
to add it tonight, that's possible. I do know we've had a couple leaks, not terrible in the middle high school this year, but, a couple places.
Madam Chair.
Ms. Sol?
I would just recommend maybe that John Engler takes a look at that part of the roof. That's an older study. Maybe there have been some patches along the way, just an updated 200,000, see if it's still applicable. I don't know, maybe that's why it's not on the list. Maybe there have been some patches along the way,
Maybe.
but it sounds like it should just be
I
revisited.
agree.
But not include it for the warrants we're sending up to the town warrant tonight? Because we won't have another meeting prior to,
I mean, I think I'm fine with that, as long as, we've got to get it at least on the capital plan list to get to the capital planning committee, if we're not going to put it on the warrant for this go-around.
That seems a more appropriate
Yes.
route at this point.
and it is in the Tetra Tech,
It is,
right?
yep.
That's where, okay.
So,
So have John evaluate the roof
Yes.
on the middle high school.
Yep.
So I have, before we vote, I do have one question or thought about the priorities. And I know that the auditorium's a mess, and I know we need a new bus lease, but instructional resources is a significant issue for us. Should we have instructional resources over auditorium chairs? The auditorium works. It's a problem. I'm not saying it's not comfortable, and we do a lot of events in there, but we don't have money. We don't have enough money set aside or using enough money for instructional materials. And if this is a priority list that we may not even get to, is it a piece of, this is an important issue for us? Just a thought. I know that the auditorium is a problem, but we don't have enough money set aside, and I don't like the idea that we have to use warrant articles for instructional materials, but that is the nature of the beast. We don't have an option at this time.
Would support that, and
I don't know if it does much.
I think we can certainly move it up. I think because we did have some heat savings last year, we were able to use it for the instructional materials at the end of the year to purchase for this year, which is perhaps why it's reflected a little lower than normally. But a year from now, when we don't have any heat savings, then it certainly is needed.
It's just a thought. I mean, it is a philosophical discussion more than anything, because everything below the line, we may not even touch it, and maybe the prioritization for the other committees is not as important. I mean, I don't know, it's just a thought that looking at instructional materials below auditoriums, chairs. We can leave as is as well.
What do people think? Do you want to make a motion to move it up? Under the where'd you put it? 2? And move auditorium to 3? Have the new bus first and then the curriculum?
I think we need another bus. I mean, I think that is truly,
Yeah,
that's a
I-
need. We have to move kids around, so.
I agree.
I don't have to do it, maybe just verbalizing that and having it kind of on the record that this is a concern of ours. Maybe that was enough.
No, I support your recommendations.
I would too.
I make a motion that we move instructional resources, currently 7 on the priority list, to 2, bumping down auditorium to the new 3. And baseball fields is gone, yeah, and then everything just else bumps down.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to move instructional resources to 2, auditorium to 3, and everything else down 1, with the removal of baseball fields, which we had. Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. So we still have the full vote, so that moved the instructional materials up. We still have to, I think Jen made a motion. We
Was
still
it
have to vote
seconded?
all this.
Yeah, and then,
All
because
this
I was
in.
doing it during the discussion.
Yep,
So now we have to go back to the other,
yep. So go back to the other motion.
the original motion.
Any additional discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Chairman's report, we're going to defer the naming of school committee. I have not done anything. We have elementary school building committee meeting next week. So I will have an update coming out of that meeting for our meeting on the 27th. So we'll be able to have some ideas around procedures that other towns have used as part of that process. So we'll defer that until the meeting on the 27th. Speaking of elementary school building committee, starts and stoppages of building based on weather is going forward. As Nancy mentioned, everything is still on time for that September date. And actually, I don't have much because we haven't met in a few weeks. I know construction meetings happen on a weekly basis, and the 2-week look-aheads get posted to Facebook and to our pages. But retention wells and then concrete soon thereafter is what's coming up on deck. So we'll keep everyone posted.
Madam Chair, I do believe I read where the cameras are now installed, the security
Oh, excellent.
cameras, which is
Thank you.
helpful because we were relying on the ones mounted on the high school prior to that, so that will be helpful.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay. Move correspondence.
I actually would, yes, we sent an electronic link to the Tech Collaborative Annual Report. If anybody would like to see the magazine, the brochure, Jody is passing it around. It is very nicely done, as is the Accept Collaborative. We believe our membership in the collaboratives is very helpful. In a previous school committee meeting, we had the request from the town for the audit of a typical request, actually, of our legal counsel for the synopsis of what currently is occurring in terms of legal matters. You have in your packets the response from our legal counsel to the town of Millis for the auditors regarding legal activity this year. Also in your packets are some nice Millis Medway local town pages, the Millis Medway News updates that include the efforts to try to get a youth football program started in town that Brian Cravey, our high school teacher, is working on. At our next meeting, you will have an update from Mr. Grant, our athletic director, on seeking the co-op with Norfolk Aggie School. he will have information for you. And there was also a nice article on the reference section for special needs that will be opened up and dedicated on February 23rd in the public library due to the efforts of the Millis CPAC. Oh, and then finally, I do have, I think it might be in your purple folders, but we are sad to report that Maureen McDermott in our office, our accounts payable person, who has been with Millis for over 22 years, has decided to retire. She is job sharing that position currently, and she has a new granddaughter or grandchild on the way. I don't know the gender, but she will be retiring on May 24th and has announced her retirement. Maureen is a phenomenal person, one of the most professional people I've had the pleasure of working with, and has a vast amount of institutional knowledge stored in her brain, and her memory is outstanding, so we rely on Maureen for various things going back over the 22 years, and she'll be missed.
Any school committee announcements? Old business or new business? Okay, we are going to adjourn to budget working session, not to return on camera. Our next meeting will be Tuesday, February 27th. Take a motion to adjourn
Motion to adjourn to working session.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much.